In many ways, death gives life to Final Fantasy VII. Of course, if we go back to the beginning, it was Hironobu Sakaguchi's grief for his mother that led him to choose the game's theme of life. That creative decision was the soul that made the story move. The OG monolith you know and love only grew as tall as you remember because of that theme coursing through its veins, unlocking its storytelling potential. Our lives, the planet, what it means when it all runs out, what it means when we run out, our responsibility to nature, our role as part of its cycle. We live, we die, we return. The life stream, the flow of spirit energy. It's not nirvana, not heaven, not a religion, not another universe. Instead, the life stream promised something different, something somehow logical in a fantastical world, something somehow real and within our grasp, a repurposing of our energy and a return to the planet. That was a form of afterlife, but as the living, as the player, it wasn't yours to experience. At the end of the story, you only caught a glimpse of the gift from beyond, a small miracle. So while Final Fantasy VII served us the biggest surprise and the greatest loss, there was hope beyond the pain of grief. Although we must one day part from our loved ones, we do so knowing that we are joined in something bigger. We live on through the planet. Yet, even with that hope held close to our hearts, we and the characters were still left with the hole that loss brings. Yes, death gave life to Final Fantasy VII in so many ways. When a child, Aerith told Elmira that her husband had died, we were struck by a kind of beautiful sadness, because even though his train would never pull into the station and she would never hold him again, a part of his goodbye had reached Aerith somehow. In the game's opening hours, Jessie, Wedge and Biggs fell apart before our eyes. The ceiling came down and there were no more voices. Not only did we lose the streets we used to walk, but we lost the people who filled them too. We had no choice but to continue their fight, to honour their lives and their efforts through our success. Later, in the heights of Cosmo Canyon, Nanaki's father, Seto, stood trapped in stone. There would be no remedy. The only reversed spell was the one Nanaki had been under. His opinion of his father altered for the good. The gift and the hope that Nanaki would now be able to go on and grow. Through many storytelling avenues, Final Fantasy VII reflected our complicated feelings of loss and hope, of death and life. And of course, Aerith's death was not iconic because of the surprise, but because of the longing we felt afterwards, and the journey of acceptance that we were asked to go on. The finality of death is challenging to accept, but it is reality. By accepting Aerith's death, Cloud regained his strength and conquered Sephiroth, and he was rewarded with a glimpse of something more. He came to understand what Aerith had become a part of. He accepted this, and as the end credits rolled, we were asked to accept this too. This was not the bad ending. It was the perfect ending. In a story about life, we understood what death meant, exactly what it meant for us in reality, exactly what it meant for Sakaguchi. And with the knowledge that our lost loved one could become part of something bigger than us, we found a small comfort. As a child, I watched how grief changed my parents, saw how they dealt with it or struggled to deal with it. Not to say I was an expert on dealing with loss, I was a child, but by the time I discovered Final Fantasy VII as a teenager, I found something deeply resonating about how its creators made a decision and refused to walk back on that decision. After all, it would only take a few polygons to load back in a perished character, a few lines of dialogue, an easy remedy for a broken heart. Instead, Final Fantasy VII refused to entertain cheap comforts, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why I loved it. Despite its fantasy setting, it seemed to honour our reality, our emotions. We shared in Cloud's pain, because we came to understand that, just like our world, there was no solution beyond acceptance. It strengthened our bond with those characters. Ultimately, they were as powerless as we were, and rendered with the same ability to accept it. Now, I've put forward quite a few criticisms of the Final Fantasy VII Remake series so far, but its handling of the theme of life is perhaps the most egregious. My major gripe with the series is how it's found a way to keep marked for death characters on our screens for as long as possible, whether that's timeline manipulation, alternate worlds, the inner workings of the livestream. It really doesn't matter to me. In a game that was about the sudden absence of somebody, the remake's decision to dedicate ample screen time to dead characters can only be seen as interesting, even intriguing, but I would say disruptive. Disruptive to what the original game was getting at, what it got at, what it left us with, what it taught us: acceptance. Now, a large part of the Final Fantasy VII fanbase seems split on whether the remake series is doing a good job of honouring that theme of life. When many OG fans talk about how the remake series seems a world away from that sense of loss by offering plenty situations and scenes where these characters live on, some remake fans are quick to say, no, these characters are dead right now and just don't know it, or will be dead very soon. The remake series will get to the same place, the same conclusion as the original game, the same lesson. That may somehow go on to be true. We may be told that, despite getting a chance to hold the hands of our lost loved ones over 3 games, we must let them go. Yes, that conclusion may be served. But will that conclusion be earned? Will you feel the loss? And will you feel the small comfort of something more? In accepting loss and accepting their place, will you still feel what the original story gave you? If someone pulled back the veil and you could see your lost loved ones right now, how would that make you feel about death? And if one day they needed to move on again, would your heart break as much as the first time they left you? If they've returned to you once, maybe they can return again. Remember when we had nothing but the gift from beyond, the glimpse, how beautiful it felt. Now Aerith can return to you in many ways, as can Zach, Biggs. We know this because the game shows us this. The game gifts us with their presence. Instead of giving us a gift from beyond at the end of a hard-fought battle, we get our Christmas presents every day. We get a tempering of the pain of loss. We get a sweet release from our constant grief. We get the band-aid, the drug, the cope. Meaning that even if part 3 is resolved by saying the dead must stay dead, this may be confused by the fact that the story has spent at least 2 parts out of 3 showing us how the dead do often return, if not only to the other characters, but to us, the player, the one who endured loss too. Some argue that the remake characters of Zach and Biggs exist within the livestream, that rather than alternate realities, we are experiencing what it's like to live within the livestream, and that, furthermore, their existence there is temporary until their energy is used up. And so it's not simply a case of these characters existing forever in a happy ever after. Never mind that we had fate-altering entities, never mind that a bullet never landed. Actually, the game went to lengths to show the opposite. Never mind that Biggs woke up. Let's just embrace the confusing storytelling and assume the game was trying to communicate that these characters are actually dead. And let's assume these dead characters' livestream existence is temporary until their energy is used up. Let's assume their cards are marked and that they must fade away. Well, even if that were the case, suddenly ripping those avenues away at the end of part 3 may do little to dampen your belief that it's possible and true that the lost loved ones of Final Fantasy VII do exist in a place and time you can reach. That's assuming part 3 even dares try to rip those avenues away. Bear in mind that these scenes are not flashbacks, they're not apparitions of a grief-stricken mind, they're moments in real time. You cannot reverse this kind of thing cleanly. It is a simple rule. And of course, the remake series has gone to places stories cannot easily get away with, particularly stories that claim to be remaking a story that was partly conceived after the death of a loved one and was meant to communicate the intense and irreversible loss. And the fact that the closest you will ever get to them is knowing they returned to and became part of the bigger world, the planet, the air you breathe, the ground you walk on. Recently, my father passed away. When I got the call that he would not last the night, despite living in another country, I was fortunate to reach him in time. It was surreal to hold his hand as he died. Not long before he passed, the hospital chaplain visited and said, "One day Your dad will do his best to send us a sign that he's okay. Maybe he'll send a robin. I hoped that could be true. Despite feeling that there's nothing beyond death, there's comfort in believing that a part of him may live on somehow. I guess selfishly, it's a way to deal with my own feelings, a way to believe they may still be resolved, that he may hear my words. So many regrets, naturally. There was so much of my life that I just never thought to share. He didn't even know I make these videos. Not that it matters, but I'll never get to tell him anything. I knew there would be emptiness, but that emptiness doesn't hit you until you need to talk to them or you expect they're about to talk to you. I used to roll my eyes as you'd start one of your long stories. Now there's nothing at all. The little things that would annoy me are suddenly the things that haunt me, the things I remember most, the things I'd love to hear again, because if I could hear them again, it would mean you were back. In the days after his death, I came to a conclusion. We know life is so important because of how death makes us feel. We know how much we love the person because of how their absence makes us feel. If we had a world of eternity, if we all lived forever, maybe I'd never understand how much someone truly meant to me. Now, all the memories and feelings that come to me are born from that ephemeral nature. The same blade that wounds me also comforts me. Now that I've felt this personal grief, it hasn't made me reevaluate anything about that original game. Instead, it's only reinforced what I already thought, that once you lose someone, you will sadly lose them. All you can hold on to is your memories, and any symbols, material or otherwise, that remind you of them. You can only go on living your life to the best of your ability, knowing that this is exactly what they would have wanted for you. I know there may be people watching who have experienced loss and who identify with how Remake and Rebirth are handling the subject. I can only give my perspective. I'm saying that I remember why the original Final Fantasy VII had such a strong impact on me. It's as close as it gets for me to the reality of the situation, to my experience of grief, even in these early days. I know my father is gone, but I like to feel he exists as part of something, that rather than fade entirely, some trace of him has given rise to something new. And if reality gave me something more than that, another version of him from a different world or timeline, or I had knowledge of a place he exists, where he is making sense of his thoughts, feelings, and memories, well, I'm sure I'd feel quite differently about the whole thing. Instead, the reality is, my father's ashes now sit in the family home. We could spread them somewhere. Maybe they'll become part of something. Maybe he'll fade into his favorite places. Maybe he'll become part of the ground or the wind or the rain. I'm faced with the finality of it all, but I have a hope that he is part of something grander, or could return to something. And I believe that's what Sakaguchi was getting at. The closest comfort in a confusing world of religions and beliefs. A life cycle. You're born, you die, you return to the planet. The energy is used for someone else's life. Nothing is wasted. Grief and pain are for the living to hold, memories of the loved one. And the small comfort of the nature of the world and our role in it is all they can hold. To challenge that, to try to address their grief and pain with supernatural, short-sighted remedies, is to challenge the very essence of Final Fantasy VII. That is what I will always be at odds with. It's not how I experience grief, and it's not how I wish to deal with my grief either. But what about Cloud? How does he deal with grief? In Rebirth's now infamous ending, as Cloud enters the Forgotten Capital, there are two roads. A space where Aerith dies, a space where she lives. As Cloud seems to embrace a reality where Aerith lives, I'm left wondering, where is my focus? Should my focus even be on this Aerith, the one Cloud is holding in his hands? Should it even be on the one that seems to be fading away? Why should I care too deeply about either one? On one hand, you may be telling me I've lost her, but I know that's demonstrably false, because she's just another scene away, or just another world away. Always has been in this remake series. On the other hand, you're telling me she may be alive through Cloud's eyes, but how is that any different than anything else you've shown me already? Since the end of Remake, you've told me that dead characters will get screen time, and will continue to get screen time. Aerith's lingering comes as no revelation. She's just joining in with the other characters who once surprised us with their lingering. Maybe this scene isn't about loss at all. It's about confusion, about a question mark that needs elongating, or is it another way of approaching the original game's iconic theme, while conveniently aligning with what seems to suit the series' marketing desires, creating a long-term mystery and leaving you waiting for a long-term answer. A part of the story may be trying to say that somewhere, in someone's point of view, Aerith is gone. Yet, during the final battle, we witness the return of Aerith walking back the death scene in as many ways as one can, so that even if you believe it happened and she's dead, they're trying to wrap you in the warmest hug they possibly can and tell you that whether you believe it happened or not, everything is going to be okay. And not only will the person always be with you, but they will literally always be with you. In the original game, after Aerith's death, the suspense and mystery were in wondering how Cloud was going to pick himself up and carry on. But now in Rebirth, the mystery is, what am I even watching? The magic for me in the original game was that iconic moment, then fighting Genova with Aerith's theme playing and thinking, is there really nothing I can do? And then watching the cast say their goodbyes, and then Cloud putting her into the water. It's all happening so slowly and so quickly, and there's nothing you can do to stop it or how the characters are reacting. It's like, wow, you really are giving up. To watch Cloud do that, it must be true. There's nothing that can be done. Then letting her disappear. Rebirth intentionally doesn't give space for us or the characters to truly process Aerith's death, if it's even happening at all. And what some fans cannot quite accept is that Rebirth has played its hand with this sequence. So forget about swinging back later and adding more detail in a sequel. This was the moment to shine. This is the height of drama, and this was their one shot at that scene. For better or worse, this is the result. Fans tell themselves, we'll see the burial scene in part 3. Perhaps, but it's misguided to believe that a scene totally divorced from the death sequence of events could have the same emotional punch, or that doing this would somehow add weight to Rebirth's ending retrospectively. If it appears, it will sit in a different kind of context, and yet it remains on fans' wish lists, like they know there was something so incomplete about this experience and this remake. And I can only ask them, do they now just want to see the upgraded visuals of that scene, to tick it off on the checklist, or do they crave the emotional reaction to that scene that they quickly realise they have sorely missed? Yes, such a flashback scene may coincide with Cloud accepting the reality of his situation. That's acceptance, sure. But the opportunity to make you feel loss in its fullest and truest form has now passed. And don't forget that it was the feeling of immense loss that started us on our slow journey to acceptance. As the dust settles on Rebirth's divisive ending, some fans are looking at it and saying, well, in hindsight, this is what grief feels like to me. I've been in positions where I've denied something horrible happened. And so you have people now saying, regardless of what happens in part 3, this is why it works as art. People talk about hallucinations and denial, simple concepts which suddenly become confusing ingredients in a story that has already set up multiple worlds and timelines, and the altering of fate. If this scene is an attempt at getting inside a character's fractured mind, the prevalence of wild concepts throughout the story makes it a murky and confusing move. And that's why, for me, the ending feels like an attempt to give both sets of fans something they can take away and cling tightly to. Aerith died and Aerith lived. Cloud is confused, as are we. Because such a scene goes against our storytelling instincts. Just as Remake's surprise ending sent a horde of people online for answers and affirmation, Rebirth takes it to the next level, where fans needed over years worth of fan explanations to try make sense of the stark feelings they had upon their first watch. Those feelings being, what is happening here? And why don't I care? Is it timeline switching? Is it Cloud in denial? Is it a bit of both? The crucial thing here is, in a game remaking a game famous for the sense of loss, you didn't feel the sense of loss, and perhaps neither did Cloud. But crucially, you didn't. This, I feel, is why many people didn't like it, and why they're still hoping to find a meaning that elevates the material. Changing fate, whispers, a confused death sequence. The problem is that these ideas do not sit well as part of Final Fantasy VII, they will always be butting heads against the original game's key theme. People talk about the mountain Cloud will need to climb, metaphorically, literally, to overcome and make sense of these feelings. But what about us? Where do we come into this? For 2 games, you've told us this is what's possible. There is a place you can go. It does exist. You didn't know it worked like this, but here it is. Timelines, live stream, whatever it is. Here it is for you. That is what Square Enix are up against. They have created so many doors to allow for dead characters to return that even the sound of those doors slamming shut in unison will never be enough to stop you from saying, there's a chance to see them again. Now, only you can answer. Is that a million miles away from what the original game left you with? While Final Fantasy VII left you with a sense of hope and comfort, I fear the remake trilogy may leave you for the rest of your life, searching for doors that never should have been opened. Now a little time has passed since my father died. There's been no Robin, no voice in the wind, no phone call, just a silence. And that is perhaps the hardest part of all. You felt the life slip away, and you know as you leave the hospital and you see the nurses and staff who were so kind to you and sharing in your grief, now talking, smiling, laughing in their own world, and the beeping cars outside, and the crowded buses on the street, and the children playing in the park, that life must go on. It may seem like the ultimate insult to you now in your grief, but it is that fact that will sustain you, that ensures your future, that promises your own rebirth. Life will go on, and you must face it in spite of your pain. There are no cheap fixes for this pain, none that would do you any good. There is only the reality of the situation. Yes, Final Fantasy VII offers that we all become part of the planet again, but we must face the greatest loss for that structure to endure. It is, in a way, the gift of life. That will always be Final Fantasy VII to me, surviving through loss. From Jesse, Wedge and Biggs' broken bodies, how their efforts paved our way, how their spirits lived on through us, the gift of Seto's tears for Nanaki, the glimpse of beyond. That was as far as the message should go. That was just enough hope to hold. Anything more than that, and it could all get washed away. This complicated balance of grief and hope. Remake Part 3 may come and dazzle, but when the spectacle wears off, will Square Enix close the show in a way that still satisfies the soul? Let's see what they do. In a trilogy of other worlds, other versions of characters, endless reams of dialogue and comfort, characters with an eternal presence who it feels like can endure any calamity the writers may now throw at them, well, for me, the odds seem stacked against it. When, not so long ago, very simply and so quickly, someone you loved left you, and you never saw them again. But one day, they sent you a robin.